Free-to-play games seem to come in three major flavors. Online games that often have microtransactions to fund that game, small indie games, and student-made games. While I enjoy all three types of free-to-play games, you do have to know what you're getting into in each of the three categories. Today's game is 50 Minutes Till Impact and is in the student-made game category. In my experience, these are the free-to-play games that are the most rough around the edges, but sometimes have some really interesting ideas due to their creative freedom. Is this the case with 50 Minutes Till Impact, or is it able to exceed expectations? 50 Minutes Till Impact is an adventure-style game developed by Atomic Baby Games. It was released in 2025 on PC via Steam. As I already stated, this is a free-to-play game, and since this is a student project, there is no official rating. It's maybe a low T rating since there is murder, violence, and some blood, but most of it is pretty subtle. The story is where 50 Minutes Till Impact shines the most. Unfortunately, it is also the type of game that you can't give too much away without spoiling things. However, I will give a short introduction to the story. You play as Clara, a girl on her way back to Earth with her brother David on a space train. Early on, you get separated from David and can't find him. In the process of looking for him, Clara gets caught up in a murder mystery time loop. All of this makes for an interesting story that had some twists and turns that I didn't expect. It also had the moments that were pretty predictable as well, so it's a little bit of a mixed bag in the end. This is true of the characters as well, because there were some characters that I really enjoyed, others that were just really annoying, or ones that I think that you're kind of meant not to like and be suspicious of, and others that just didn't really have all that much personality at all. Overall, I would say that I enjoyed the story, but it did have some flaws along the way. Sadly, gameplay is where I had most of my struggles. Even here though, there were some interesting ideas that I liked, but they were just outweighed by some major flaws that made playing through the game a bit frustrating. Let's start with what I liked though. Overall, the gameplay is pretty much your standard adventure style game. Find items and clues, solve puzzles, and talk to people. The standout gameplay element that I really enjoyed in 50 Minutes Till Impact was the ability to store solutions to already solved puzzles in your notes. This was particularly nice due to the time loop nature of the game. You didn't have to remember a code, redo a puzzle, or write down the solution since it was right in your inventory after first solving it. So it just made for a nice feature with a game that had you going through a lot of the same events multiple times. This also had an issue since one puzzle in the game didn't save its solution to your notes. Your notes made it fairly easy to solve quickly, but it would have been nice to have had that solution added to your notes as well once you solved the puzzle the first time. On the other side of things, there were a number of aspects that I found either frustrating or underwhelming about the gameplay. The main issue was that moving through the dialogue was a chore. It was almost like you couldn't continue the story until someone's line would have been written out without skipping it. This was very frustrating. It would have been nice to move through dialogue a lot quicker. This genre of game is mostly about talking to people, and having the player be able to control how quick they get through that dialogue is pretty important in my opinion. There also seemed to be some weird things with the inventory. Some inventory items you could keep from time loop to time loop, but others you had to make sure you picked up even if you already had it in your inventory. It was just a weird issue that didn't really make sense other than they wanted you to go get that item for story reasons. In all honesty, it would have made more sense to have to pick up all the items again after each time loop, but it's just something that didn't really work out in my mind, as well as the puzzle solutions. Speaking of items and inventory, I also didn't like how when you picked up an item, it stayed in the environment. This is mostly a minor nitpick, but it made me wonder if I really picked up that item or not. I could even understand resetting it after a time loop, but it would have been nice to see it removed from the background right after you picked it up. Sadly, I just found the gameplay here to be a bit disappointing overall. I think for me, the dialogue issue was by far the most frustrating. That's like a central core part of a game like this, and having that be somewhat broken really detracted from the experience. Add in some other minor flaws, and I found the gameplay just a bit underwhelming overall. The art style of 50 Minutes Till Impact is a bit of a mixed bag. I wouldn't say any of it is amazing, but most of it works okay. The best aspect is probably the character portraits for the dialogue scenes. The environment is okay, but in general something felt a bit off about it. Like it's a little too plastic looking or just kind of fake feeling. The actual character models are a little terrifying if you look too close. I mean, look at those eyes. These people have seen things. Terrible things. But seriously, the art is okay. It's mostly average, but also dips to below average. Sound, well, the reality here is that the sound didn't really work for me. Most of the time, I only heard the click of progression in the dialogue. I didn't have any background music or any voice acting, just silence and some clicking, except when out of nowhere a voice line would work and startle me.
We don't know if there are any other dangerous passengers on board.
I don't know why it only worked in such a limited fashion. I tried messing around with things, uninstalling, reinstalling, and nothing seemed to really work for me. So in some ways, I can't really say much about the sound, but since it didn't work, it also is more of a negative for me than anything else. Honestly, I think that if the game hadn't occasionally had voice lines work, I would have just not expected it to have had full voice acting or maybe even full background music, and probably would have been a little bit more generous on this had it just not included those things than knowing that yeah, this was included somewhat and it just didn't work for the vast majority of my time with the game. 50 Minutes Til Impact is a game that has an interesting story, but the end result is just so rough around the edges that it's hard to really recommend it. I understand that this is a student project, but I've played those before. While I would consider few of those to be amazing, this one is a bit more rough than others I've played. That's why I'm giving 50 Minutes Til Impact a 5 out of 10. I think that the good equaled the bad here. The game has some promising ideas both in story and the way they allowed for the character to keep track of puzzle solutions for the time loops. There was, however, way too much stuff in the game that just didn't really work very well or just felt or looked a bit off. The inability to move through dialogue at your own pace and the sound being completely messed up for me were pretty big issues that really detracted from the overall experience of the game. This would have easily been a bit higher for me if these issues were dealt with and ironed out. There is a lot of potential here with the concept, but there are just far too many things that brought the game down for me. It is free, so you can give it a try if it looks interesting to you or you like checking out games like these, but I can't really recommend it in terms of quality.